Hello, my name's Audrey Scanlan. I'm the Bishop of the Episcopal Diocese of Central Pennsylvania, and I'm coming to you today, taping this on the 23rd of September in the year 2021. You will be seeing this on the 24th of September. I'm coming to you today from my back porch where suddenly the day has turned sunny and bright. I took my morning walk in the middle of a deluge this morning under an umbrella, so it's nice to see some blue sky. As you know, I've been away for a couple of weeks. The last 2 weeks, my husband and I were in California celebrating the birth of our newest granddaughter, Alice Millay Evanson, and also taking care of our 2-year-old grandson, Everett William, and also his sister, Sarah. And so we've had just a wonderful couple of weeks filled with family and all those fun parts of grandparenting, going on walks and bringing presents and giving bath time and reading stories. And it's been just a joy. It's also good to be back here in our diocese and back to work. My week this week has been spent with the House of Bishops. We gather twice a year. We were to be in St. Louis for this past week, but of course we ended up doing the meeting remotely, virtually on Zoom. So I've been spending many hours upstairs in my office on Zoom with the House of Bishops, as we have been able to hear 3 different exciting and rousing sermons, really, about the state of the church, where we are today, and offering hope for the future and Jesus' way of love. And then we spent quite a bit of time in our table groups. Each of us is assigned to a table of about 6 to 8 different bishops, where we can process the different reports that we've received and sermons that we've heard, and talk about how it is that we are living our lives in this vocation as we oversee and shepherd our congregations and dioceses across the Episcopal Church. So it's been a full 2 or 3 weeks. Next week I'll be back in the office, and I am so eager to be back and with my staff again and with all of you. I thought that in the next 3 weeks, as we lead up to convention, that I would spend my time on these Friday videos talking about some of the strategic priorities that I've identified as your bishop for our work together in the next 6 years. Now, why 6 years, you wonder? Well, I've been in our diocese for 6 years now. I'm just beginning our 7th year together. And I anticipate another 6 years or so before I retire. And so we're at a midway point, and I think it's a good time and a good place to take stock of who we are and where we are, what we've achieved so far, and the growth that is yet to come. We've been working very hard for 2 years now, even through the pandemic, on our Shaped by Faith initiative. I feel that we're making good headway in taking an honest look at who we are in the diocese, what our factors of sustainability are, how we're serving God's mission, and beginning to come up with some really creative ideas about how we can move forward, really strengthened for the work ahead. But I have created a document called the Bishop's Strategic Outlook for the years 2021 to 2027, and I'll be talking about that at convention. But in these videos, I thought I could give you just a taste of each of the initiatives that I have highlighted or pinpointed for the work. And there are 5 of them. So this week I'll talk about 1. Very briefly, and then in the next 2 weeks we'll talk about 2 and 3, and then 4 and 5 before we get to convention. So let me give you just a quick overview of all 5 of them, and then I'll speak to the first. The first strategic priority, the first strategic initiative that I have in mind, is to continue the work of integrating our diocese into what Martin Luther King Jr. has called the beloved community. And so I'll talk about that more in a moment. But really, this is not new work for us. This is work that we've been at for some time, and yet to continue this work and to continue to integrate the work. So it's not siloed work, but work that we're all doing in the diocese, and part of our identity as God's beloved community. So that's the first one. The second strategic initiative will be to complete the work that we've been doing through Shaped by Faith. And that will, of course, involve a second phase of Shaped by Faith that we're calling the implementation phase. So you will hear more about that. The third strategic initiative is to restructure our finances in the diocese. And honestly, a lot of that work is already underway. You'll be hearing in the budget that's coming to convention about a newly structured diocesan assessment formula. So we're excited to share that with you. We're also looking at our investments and our granting processes as well. Fourthly, the fourth strategic initiative will be to continue to develop and hone the formation resource of the Stevenson School for Ministry. And I'll be telling you much more about that in a couple of weeks. You may know that we are in the process for searching for a new dean. Robin Zook Coolidge, who has served so admirably and beautifully in the last 6 years as dean, will be retiring in December, and so we look forward to welcoming a new dean in the new year. And then the fifth diocesan strategic initiative that I'm excited about is really developing a whole new system for diocesan structure of staffing. We have, as you know, a staff at our diocesan house that serves our diocese, and I'm excited about exploring the shape of that staff, as well as looking to new opportunities with our neighboring diocese of Bethlehem, how we might begin to collaborate and work more together. But let me speak for now about this first initiative, about continuing to work towards becoming the beloved community. And what I think is really key about this is integrating that work into the life, into the fabric of who we are. This is the first priority because to me it is not only the most important priority for us as God's people in central Pennsylvania, but it's also what I would call an ontological, not an ontological change for us, but a part of our ontology. It's about who we are. It's about our being, which is what, of course, ontology is. The other four initiatives that I've talked to you about briefly are not about who we are in our being, but what we do. And so we begin with the very core of who we are and what our being is. So let me say just a couple words about that phrase, the beloved community. You may know it as a phrase that Martin Luther King Jr. used in some of his addresses, and indeed it is a theme and an idea that looks at a global reality of inclusion and equality, where poverty and homelessness and injustice is eliminated. Now, Martin Luther King Jr. didn't invent the phrase. He got it from an early 20th century philosopher, Josiah Royce, and he used it in his work, and then Martin Luther King Jr. adopted that phrase as he worked to promote this idea of equality and inclusion and justice across not just the United States, but across our globe. We have done a job of funneling some of that, extracting that or funneling that down even to a finer sense. So it has become for us meaning as we work towards dismantling racism. And so when I talk about becoming the beloved community in the Diocese of Central Pennsylvania, I'm talking about how is it that we continue to address issues of racism in our diocese. And for us, quite honestly, that's tricky. It's tricky because we're primarily in the Episcopal Church in our diocese. We're primarily a white church, white congregants. And yet, We live in our diocese, certainly in the cities in our diocese, in very multicultural and multi-ethnic and multiracial communities. And so how is it in the Episcopal Church that we can make ourselves a more welcoming and inclusive place? What is it about our being as Episcopalians that we can shift, that we can open and embrace a more diverse community? And I think that is an ontological change for us, and the idea of integrating it into all the work that we do is so important. And so we're not just talking about how can we make our churches more welcoming to a more diverse community, but how do we get our clergy to be representative of a more diverse body? How can we make our diocesan staff more inclusive of a diverse body? And so that is work that we will be doing. Some of it will require funding. We want to continue to fund the Dismantling Racism Commission that we have. We want to continue to fund and work hard at promoting the good work of the Stevenson School, as they now have 2 Becoming the Beloved Community classes, as well as hiring faculty and staff who are people of color who can continue to share all the gifts that they bring in our diocese. And so there's a lot of work to do, but there's a lot of work already underway. One of the efforts of the Dismantling Racism Commission will be to build a resource hub, if you will, on our website that can really show all of the work that is being done, all of the resources that we have already in the diocese. And so I look forward to that. So that's the number 1 priority for us. Strategic initiative is to continue to integrate the work of Becoming the Beloved Community into the life of our diocese. So I'd like to close with some words from St. Paul's letter to the Galatians. You know this part of the 3rd chapter quite well, I'm sure. It will serve as our closing prayer for today. Paul writes, "But now that faith has come, we are no longer subject to a disciplinarian. For in Christ Jesus, you are all children of God through faith. As many of you who were baptized into Christ have clothed yourselves with Christ. There is no longer Jew or Greek. There is no longer slave or free. There is no longer male and female, for all of you are one in Christ Jesus. And if you belong to Christ, then you are Abraham's offspring, heirs according to the promise." So friends, I hope that you are well. It is really great to be back here in the diocese, back home, back with our kiddies, and back to work. So may God bless you and guide you and keep you and all those whom you love this day and forever.